Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Superfluid Sanctuary. I am your host, Professor C, and I'll be taking us through another A&P study session. Specifically today, we're going to talk about the hierarchy of organization. So, without any further business, let's jump right into it. Let's talk about the complexity of the human body. It's obviously impossible to talk about every part at the same time. You have to break it apart somehow, just like the literal act of cutting it up. So pretend you have some sort of organization like, I don't know, Amazon or Walmart or even the military, where you have some person in charge. Like maybe you would call this person a CEO or a president or something like that. And maybe under him you'd have, a vice president or something like that. And then you have managers under that, division heads, chairs, and so forth. And then if you keep on going down the list, you get to little OU working in the trenches, right? Doing the work for the people above them. This is a hierarchy of organization. So you can do this similarly to the way you do in a human body. You can start small and you can work your way up to the entire big boss, which is going to be called an organism. So in anatomy, you can do it this way. Level 1, extreme bottom is atoms. They will combine to form molecules. Molecules will combine to form cells and their organelles, we'll see. Cells will combine to form tissue. Tissues will combine to form organs. Organs will combine to form an organ system, and this will finally wrap itself up with some skin or something like that, and we'll call it an organism. Okay, so let's look at each individual level of the hierarchy and make some points about those. Drawing the curtain back, if you will, on the levels of hierarchy. Level 1 is the atomic level, the chemical level, and it refreshes our memory here. It starts with atoms. Atoms collide with each other, forming bonds, and that's a very good term to know, which we'll talk about later, and create small molecules. For example, here we see something called O. That's oxygen. You probably recognize that. That's called an atom of oxygen. There's many ways to show it. You can show it on a chart like this. You can show it as kind of this fancy orbital type of model. You can do it as this, sun and moon kind of model that we're doing over here. But we see an oxygen atom. We also see a hydrogen atom and another hydrogen atom. And it looks like they're kind of hanging out together. I've got two hydrogens, H, two of them, and an oxygen, right? Okay, well, most of you predicted already. We have water. And what we can say is 2 atoms of hydrogen plus an atom of oxygen can be combined to form a molecule of water. And that's how to use the terminology. So atoms combine to form molecules. Most of these molecules are very small, like water, carbon dioxide, and so forth. But they can get bigger. And we usually call these macro molecules because they're quite large. And these are so important to know. I'm going to put a big old red star next to them. Proteins, carbohydrates, or the cool kids just say carbs, right? Proteins, carbs, lipids, also known as fats. We've covered that root already, lip. And nucleic acids, the ones that's the most strangest to people. But if you come over here and you look at things like DNA, RNA, I know you've heard those terms. The NA stands for nucleic acid, D nucleic acid, and R nucleic acid. So these are the 4 major groups of giant molecules: proteins, carbs, lipids, and nucleic acids. We'll learn more about those later. Take a step up. You started with atoms. They combine to form molecules, take many millions of molecules, build a complete cell. Here's the next step up, the cellular level. And don't forget its many organelles, the little machines inside of here. Again, let's kind of remind us what we see. We see kind of like a blob of something here in the center. Well, that's a nucleus again, right? And then out here, I see this boundary. Well, that's the membrane we talked about earlier. And then in between, I kind of see this network of bubble-looking things and string-looking things and all these structures inside the cell between the nucleus and the membrane. These are the organelles, the small little machines that run the cell. It's estimated that your human body has about 40 trillion cells, and that does not include any of the bacteria or other normal microbiota that lives on your body, in your body. Why is it important to know about this? Very good question. Well, it goes like this. If you want to understand some sort of disease process, you must understand something that's wrong at the cellular level. So it said there, all medical conditions are rooted at a cellular level. If you really want to understand a medical problem, you must understand the problem at the cellular level. Tissues. All right, we're taking the next step up. Cells form, and I can see them again. There's a little cell with a nucleus, and here's a little cell with a nucleus, and here's a little cell with a nucleus, and you can see them all over the page. Many cells hanging out together, doing the same job. We call these tissues. In anatomy and physiology, you talk about 4 major types of tissues. Again, this is so important. I'm going to put a big old red star here and say, make sure we know this part. Just like the 4 biomolecules, proteins, carbs, lipids, and nucleic acids. These are the 4 major tissue types. Epithelial, which you see pictured here. Connective, which you see pictured at the bottom of the slide. Muscle tissue, and nerve or nervous tissue, and we'll get into these in much more detail in the future. So again, let's go over the hierarchy. Atoms to molecules to cells and their organelles to tissues. Well, what happens, you might ask, if you take a couple of these tissues and put them together? What do you get? Well, you get an organ. And that is the definition of an organ. An organ is a combination of 2 or more of those tissue types. Let's remind ourselves of the 4 tissue types real quick. E for epithelial, C for connective, M for muscle, and N for nervous tissue. And that happens to be the one I see here, mostly nervous tissue. But there are some other tissues associated with the brain than just nervous tissue. So I could ask a question, is the brain an organ? And most people will say, of course it is. And I'll say, why is the brain an organ? And your default answer should be, it's made of 2 or more tissue types. Keep going. Is the skin an organ? Yes. Why? It's made of 2 or more tissue types. Is a blood vessel, like an artery, is it an organ? Turns out, by the definition, yes it is, because a blood vessel is made of 2 or more tissue types. How many organs are in the body? Well, there's a lot. There's about 78, depending on who you ask, although it is debatable. You wouldn't think it would be, but it is, but approximately 78. 5 of these are essential to keep you alive, and it's probably the 5 you can think of. You chain some of these organs together, and you get an organ system. And that's what the basic definition is, a combination of 2 or more organs that work together to perform a lot of different body functions. Some, as you learn these, you'll see that some organs serve roles in multiple systems. We will learn 11 organ systems. Now, if you look up at the fellas at the top there and you count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's only 9 fellas here. It looks like 2 are missing. You could play a little game right here with yourself and try to figure out which 2 are missing, but I'll tell the answer on the next talk. How about that, when we talk about organ systems in more detail. If you take all the organs and all the systems and all the tissues and you wrap some beautiful little skin around it, you get the organism. So I've got all these little Lego figures here, you know. Take their heads off and their arms off and their bodies off and their legs off, and you have all the components, but you stick them together and you have, you know, something that's more than just the sum of its parts. So the organism would represent the top of the hierarchy, the president, if you will, the chief executive officer of the hierarchy is the organism, all the cells, all the tissues, and all the systems. To sum it up and to end this talk, see if you can think of in your mind the hierarchy. If you can, I've put a chart over here to take you through. But it goes atoms, followed by molecules, and many millions of molecules form up to make cells and their organelles. Don't forget about the machines. A couple of cells, many cells, similar shape, similar function, working together, same location. These are called tissues. 4 major tissue types, right? You can remind yourself of them again. Epithelial, connective, muscle, nervous tissue, right? Take 2 or more of these tissues and we have something we call an organ. Take 2 or more of these organs and we have a system of organs called an organ system, which there are 11 of them that we study. Wrap them up in some beautiful skin and you have the organism complete. All right. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked this one, check out the other videos in the series. Have a great day.